Imagine this. You wake in the middle of the night, your heart pounding as if it's trying to escape your ribs. There's no intruder in the room, no nightmare still clinging to your eyelids, just silence, thick and heavy. Yet something is wrong. A pressure sits in your chest, a whisper at the base of your skull, a voice you've spent years drowning out. You can't keep running. But from what? That's the question that haunts you in these quiet hours. Not the surface fears, failure, rejection, loneliness, but the deeper, nameless thing that slithers beneath them. The thing you refuse to look at directly because some part of you knows. If you do, your life will no longer be the same. So you run. You fill your days with noise, with work, with distractions that feel like progress. You chase goals you don't truly want, people who don't truly see you, versions of yourself that are nothing but elaborate disguises. And yet, no matter how fast you move, the shadow remains. Here's the paradox. The more you flee, the heavier it grows. What? Because what you're running from isn't a monster, it's a mirror. Every time you silence that voice, every time you numb the discomfort, every time you choose distraction over truth, you feed the very fear you're trying to escape. You reinforce the lie that you are not strong enough to face yourself, that you are not worthy of your own honesty. But what if the opposite were true? What if the thing you've been avoiding is the only path to the life you secretly long for? Think of the moments you felt most alive, raw, unfiltered, electric. Were they not the moments you stopped pretending? When you stood in the storm of your own truth and realized, even for a second, that you could survive it, that you could thrive in it? This is the great question clawing at the door of your consciousness. What would happen if you stopped running? Not tomorrow, not when you're ready, but now. What would you see? What would you feel? What version of yourself, wild, untamed, unapologetic, might finally step forward? The answer is not a thought. It's a tremor in the bones, a shift in the axis of your being, and it's closer than you think. But first, you must understand why you run at all. You tell yourself you run because you're afraid of pain, of failure, of the unknown. But that's only half the truth. The real reason is far more unsettling. You run because you've been taught to. From the moment you could understand language, you were handed an invisible script. A blueprint for how to be acceptable, likable, safe. Society, family, even well-meaning mentors conditioned you to believe that certain parts of you were dangerous. Too much anger and you're difficult. Too much sadness and you're burdensome. Too much desire and you're selfish. Too much truth and you're disruptive. So you learn to amputate. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the exiled parts of the self, locked away not because they were evil, but because they didn't fit the narrative. Friedrich Nietzsche saw it as a sickness of the spirit, where we trade our authenticity for the false comfort of belonging. And Viktor Frankl, who stared into the abyss of human suffering, warned that the greatest tragedy isn't pain. It's avoiding pain so relentlessly that we forget how to live. Yet here's the cruel irony. The more you deny these fragments of yourself, the more they control you. Think of the last time you lied to avoid conflict. The moment you swallowed your truth to keep the peace. The dream you abandoned because it felt too audacious. Each time, you didn't just silence a part of yourself. You handed it a leash. And now, it pulls you in directions you don't understand. Why do you procrastinate? Why do you sabotage relationships when they get too close? Why does success sometimes feel more terrifying than failure? Because the exiled self always fights back. Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith, the act of betraying yourself to fit into a role, then wondering why you feel like a ghost in your own life. Arthur Schopenhauer saw it as the root of human misery. We chase illusions of security, only to find ourselves trapped in cages of our own making. But the most insidious lie of all? That this is just how life is. That anxiety is normal. That emptiness is inevitable. That the gnawing sense of something missing is simply the price of being an adult. No, it's the price of a life half-lived. The truth is, you weren't born running. You were taught to. Conditioned by a world that profits from your fear. A world that sells you distractions instead of demanding your courage. A world that rewards compliance over sovereignty. But beneath all that noise, beneath the shoulds, the expectations, the borrowed identities, something remains. A voice. Faint but unbroken. And it's asking you one terrifying question. What are you willing to lose to finally be free? At first, the cost seems negligible. A suppressed thought here. A stifled impulse there. You trade fragments of your truth for temporary comfort, like a traveler selling off pieces of their map to buy moments of warmth in the cold. But the body keeps score. The mind does not forget. Slowly the debt compounds. That unexplainable fatigue that coffee can't shake. The hollow victories that leave you emptier than before. The relationships that feel like performances rather than connections. These are not random afflictions, they are the echoes of a self you've been gaslighting for years. Neurologically, the evidence is chilling. When you consistently override your instincts, the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, learns to interpret your own truth as a threat. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for discernment, begins to atrophy from disuse. You become a stranger in your own nervous system, mistaking the numbness of avoidance for peace. Culturally, the trap is even more sinister. You're handed prefabricated identities like costumes: the good employee, the reliable friend, the perfect partner. Wear them long enough and the fabric fuses to your skin. Soon you mistake the costume for your flesh. And when the dissonance grows too loud, when the weight of the performance makes your knees buckle, you're offered solutions that only tighten the straps. You need better time management. Try positive thinking. Maybe you're just not disciplined enough. But this isn't a productivity problem. It's a rebellion of the soul. Aldous Huxley foresaw this in Brave New World, not a dystopia of overt oppression, but one where people learn to love their servitude. Where suffering comes not from being forbidden the truth, but from being too numb to want it. Where the most dangerous prison has no walls, only cushions. The modern world has perfected this. Your phone isn't just a device, it's a pacifier for existential dread. Your productivity isn't just efficiency, it's a sacrament to the god of validation. Your relationships aren't just connections, they're audits of your worthiness. And beneath it all, the unasked question: when did survival become synonymous with betrayal? The consequences are not abstract. They live in your cells. The creativity that withers from lack of courage. The relationships that starve from lack of truth. The life that shrinks to fit the cage you stopped noticing. But here's what they don't tell you. The cage was never locked, only familiar. The first lie you must burn is this: I'll face myself when I'm ready. There is no ready. There is only now. Liberation begins with a single, blasphemous act. You must turn toward what you've spent a lifetime fleeing. Not with the trembling steps of a prisoner finally released, but with the furious defiance of one who realizes the bars were illusions all along. This is not self-improvement. This is revolution. 1. The alchemy of attention. What you resist persists. What you observe transforms. Every time you flinch away from discomfort, every time you numb, distract, or rationalize, you feed the shadow. But when you turn toward it with ruthless curiosity, something extraordinary happens. The monster reveals itself as a messenger. Try this. Next time anxiety claws at your throat, don't chant affirmations. Don't think positive. Lean in. Ask, what are you here to show me? The tightness in your chest isn't weakness, it's trapped truth. The voice whispering you're not enough isn't your enemy, it's a distorted plea from some exiled part of you that never got to speak. 2. The sacred no. Your freedom lives in the choices you've been most afraid to make. The job that pays well but drains your soul. The relationship that's comfortable but stale. The identity that fits but suffocates. Every yes, given out of fear, is a brick in your own prison. Start small but seismic. Decline an invitation without explanation. Voice the unpopular opinion you've been biting back. Spend an entire day doing nothing without guilt. These are not acts of rebellion against the world, they're acts of loyalty to yourself. 3. The weaponization of imperfection. They told you vulnerability was weakness. They were wrong. Your cracks aren't flaws, they're fissures where light gets in. The parts of yourself you've deemed too much, or not enough, are actually your superpowers in disguise. Your sensitivity isn't fragility, it's your radar for truth. Your anger isn't dangerous, it's your compass for justice. Your quirks aren't liabilities, they're your signature. History's most transformative figures weren't those who had it all together, they were the ones who stopped pretending. Van Gogh's madness birthed Starry Nights. Frida's pain painted masterpieces. Your broken parts aren't obstacles to greatness, they're the raw materials. 4. The daily crucible. Freedom isn't won in grand gestures, it's claimed in microscopic moments. That extra second before you automatically say, I'm fine. The deep breath before you swallow your truth. The pause when you choose discomfort over delusion. This is where the real war is fought, not in dramatic battles, but in the quiet resistance of living undefended. The revolution won't look like you expect. It won't arrive with fireworks, but with subtle tremors. The day you realize you'd rather be lonely than fake. The moment your honesty surprises even you. The morning you wake up and, for no discernible reason, feel like a stranger in your own life, in the best possible way. You'll know it's working when the things that once terrified you, silence, stillness, being truly seen, become your sanctuaries. When the mask starts to itch rather than comfort. When the person in the mirror finally makes eye contact. But this is only the beginning. The final revelation, the one that reconfigures your entire existence, awaits. There comes a moment, sudden as a lightning strike, yet inevitable as dawn, when you finally understand. You were never broken. All those years spent fixing, improving, hustling for worthiness, they weren't preparing you for greatness. They were distracting you from the most shocking truth of all. You were already whole. Not in some spiritual bypassing, faux enlightened way, but in the bone-deep, unglamorous realization that your so-called flaws, the very things you've been running from, contain the exact frequencies needed for your unique symphony. The grand paradox. Every spiritual tradition whispers it in different tongues. The Buddhists call it tathata, suchness. The Christians name it grace. The quantum physicists prove it as non-locality. But stripped of dogma, it's simply this: what you seek is what you are. Your exhaustion? The fatigue of wearing armor you mistook for skin. Your anxiety? The friction between who you pretend to be and who you actually are. Your loneliness? Not from lack of others, but from abandoning yourself. The final illusion to shatter. The most dangerous story you've believed isn't, "I'm not enough." It's, "I'll be enough when I heal, when I succeed, when I'm loved, when I'm perfect." This is the ultimate sleight of hand, the illusion that wholeness exists somewhere other than here, sometime other than now. That enlightenment lives on some distant mountaintop rather than in this messy, miraculous moment. The practice of radical embodiment. The mirror gaze. Stand naked before a mirror, literally or metaphorically. Meet your own eyes without apology or flinching. Whisper, "This is the face of God becoming." The forbidden question. Next time shame arises, ask, "What if this isn't a flaw but a sacred feature?" The daily remembering. Set alarms labeled not with tasks but with truths. You exist. That is enough. The universe dreamed you into being for this. The unforeseen reward. When you stop running, an astonishing thing happens. The world rearranges itself to meet your authenticity. Not because the universe rewards bravery, though it does, but because you finally develop the receptors to perceive what was always there. Coincidences become conversations with the divine. Obstacles transform into sacred geometry. Strangers mirror back parts of yourself you forgot existed. This isn't law of attraction. This is law of attention. What you truly are can finally be seen when you stop pretending to be otherwise. The last secret. You'll spend days, months, maybe years still forgetting. You'll chase old ghosts, clutch at familiar chains, temporarily lose yourself in the collective hypnosis. But something will have shifted irrevocably, like a snake who shed its skin but keeps instinctively returning to the outgrown casing before remembering, "Oh, I live here now." And one ordinary Tuesday, as you're washing dishes or walking the dog or staring at the indifferent stars, it will hit you with the force of 1,000 epiphanies. The running was the prison. The stopping, the surrender, was always the freedom. Not freedom from pain but freedom through it. Not freedom from fear but freedom bigger than it. Not freedom from being human but freedom to finally be one. And in that moment you'll do the most revolutionary thing possible. You'll laugh at the cosmic joke, at the wasted years, at the breathtaking simplicity of what always was. Then you'll take your next breath, no longer a fugitive from yourself but finally, irrevocably,